Welcome to Coming to Your Senses, where we talk about navigating the labyrinth of the mind and emerging victorious. Today, I am joined by a very dear friend of mine, Ellie Stead. So thank you for joining us, Ellie. I'm going to launch straight in with a question because there's so many things that I know that you have changed in your life in the 10 years, happy 10-year anniversary since I've known you.
Yes.
But I want to start with asking you if you can share with us a time in your life where you've come to your senses and where and what that led you to from that revelation. So I'm going to hand over to you, Ellie.
Yeah. So 2020 was an interesting year for most of us in terms of the pandemic. But during the course of that year, I don't know that it was triggered by the pandemic. I think it was that my mind was really starting to challenge, why am I getting up to do what I'm doing every day? And what joy am I getting out of it now, having been in private sector for over 30 years. I'd been at my current company by that stage almost 18 years, and I was at a pretty senior level. In the summer, so this would have been in between different series of lockdowns, I was really starting to think and consider, could I change direction? Could I do something different? And I toyed with that idea, but then kind of carried on through the year. And then towards the back end of the year, I ended up picking up a really big program of work, and it was very high stakes, high pressure, very challenging, herding cats all over the place, and just mentally and emotionally, one of the most, I've done lots of big projects, but this particular one, there's something about it, it just really wore me down. And it got to the point where I delivered the end result, and physically and from a mental health point of view, I was probably in the worst place I'd ever been in my career. Physically, I was showing very visible, and I ended up going to the doctor. And as a woman, as an executive, as a senior leader in an organisation, particularly in industries where it's very predominantly male oriented, and that's a whole different set of challenges we could talk in a different podcast about, and kind of being an authentic female leader. I really struggled to admit to the doctor and to myself that actually I needed to take a little bit of time out and do a proper reset and recharge. The doctor was very clear, I really don't want you to go back to work, and signed me off for 2 weeks, which I fought against really hard. There was this inner turmoil and like this little person on my shoulder saying, no, like man up, and you've got to be strong and work through it, and you can do it. And then this other, kind of voice on the other shoulder saying, listen to the doctor and listen to what your own body and your mind is telling you. You are absolutely just shattered. You can't think coherently. Physically, lots of different symptoms coming into play. And so I took that 2 weeks off, and it's the first time in my whole career I'd taken time off where it was really about stress and mental health. And that was a really hard thing to admit to myself, that I can't be strong all the time. And actually, I am fallible and human. But during those 2 weeks, I had this really significant realisation that I couldn't sustain this continued high level of stress or the very extreme peaks and troughs that came with the role that I was in. And so when I came back to work, I told my employer that I was going to leave. And that was a massive leap of faith, because I knew, although I was giving 7 months notice and lots of time for them to replace me, I was leaving with no job to go to. And as a risk manager and a deeply ingrained planner, it went against everything about how I'm wired, but I just knew I had to do something different. I had to look at a different direction. I had to find roles or organisations that fueled my soul and made me want to get up and enjoy doing what I was doing every day. And I really wasn't there anymore. The company I was working for, like many private sectors, it was about the profit more than it was about the people. Over time, and that isn't how I'm wired. Everything for me is about people. It's about the interactions and how you get the the best out of people, even when sometimes they don't see that in themselves, to make them feel good about coming to work every day, to help them feel motivated and that they're growing. And the company was just getting a little bit less and less about that for me in terms of my style of leadership.
I think as a friend, but as also somebody who'd been in that environment to deliver some trainings and things as well, I'd seen you be this leader who cared so much about others. And, even the team away days that you did, for example, they weren't your normal mainstream team away days. You really got to know your team and did some out of the box things where they just had fun and got to know each other in a different way. It wasn't an end target of them having to develop X, Y, or Z about themselves, but that naturally started to happen because you do have a wonderful skill of seeing qualities in people that they may not even see themselves and seeing that potential in others. What I'm curious about is how much of that was a focus outside or on others, and over time actually then meant that you were forgetting your own qualities, your own strength, because you were focused on delivering and taking care of others. Would you agree that was part of it?
Yeah, I think part of my focus and how I'm wired is about delivery. So some of it is about focus on task, and I can be quite single-minded in terms of a project, a deliverable, making sure it's done right, high quality, making sure it hits the deadline and it's done on budget. But ultimately, it's about carrying the people in the project along with you because you can't do it all. But having said that, I think there are a lot of times in my life when I look back, and I am getting better at this, about taking time for self-care and self-reflection. I've not always done that because I'm always, I am busy. I have a full life. I like having a full life. But I've come to the realization in recent years that actually there's got to be some balance and you can't do everything all of the time. And making choices and saying no, which is hard. Saying no and asking for help. And you will know from experience, two things that I have had challenges with in the past. I am getting much, much better at that. And again, accepting that you cannot be perfect. And it's interesting, as I've transitioned out of private sector into third sector in a sort of charity CEO role, there are still lots of expectations or pressures about expecting that you are giving, 100% or more all the time. Everything is going to be perfect. But a lot of that is self-inflicted, because actually not everybody does expect that on the outside or that you're working with, but you carry it with you. So again, it's making sure you've still got that balance because the pressures and the stresses are different. But again, the need for self-care and realizing when you need a little bit of downtime and again, one thing I've learned is, especially in a charity where we provide support for people with mental health challenges, is being willing as a leader to be vulnerable and admit when you're having a spell or you've got a time or you've just got a day when I'm just really struggling. I know that in different countries they call it duvet days or some companies have days that you can just take off where if you're having some mental health struggles, you can take that bit of downtime. But actually openly admitting, less than 12 months ago to my management team that I had a day where I was just really struggling. I didn't want to put the game face on, and be everything that I need to be to everybody on site. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to work from home today. That wasn't my plan, but I need a quiet day with a bit of introspection. I just need to do a little bit of a reset because I'm just struggling a bit today. I would never have admitted that a couple of years ago, and actually that felt like a good step forward and to demonstrate that to all of my team, you don't have to plough through it if you're feeling really, you're feeling challenged or you're really struggling with something. It's okay to admit that.
It's interesting because having known you over that 10 years and seen you in the private sector and how many hours you were working and how much pressure, I'm not sure how much of it was external, how much of it was internal. I'm sure that there was quite high levels of both at times. what I'm noticing you talking about now in that vulnerability, in that being able to ask for help and say no. Was there space for that in the private sector? And obviously, when we're talking about sectors, it's very general terms, and we are talking about your experience in a particular organisation. But would you have said within that organisation or within that industry that as a woman in particular, but even as a senior, a senior executive, was there a permission really to be able to go, I need that time out, I need just to take a day off or work from home, or actually can I have a conversation because I need some help with this? Was that even there?
I think it was there in the broader sense. We'd trained a number of people to be mental health first aiders, and there was a
Okay.
really good take up for people wanting to do that. I know from experience in some of my teams that some of my managers, and I can think of one instance in particular, could see that someone was really, really struggling and not in a good way, and really kind of help them through a kind of a very gentle discussion to realise that they needed support, they needed help, they needed time out, and that there was no shame in that. And I was really supportive of that, because actually, when that situation played out, that person was in a much worse kind of way than we'd even realised, and
Right.
ended up taking quite a good deal of time off to help get through that. I think at the senior level, it was a very different scenario. And certainly as a woman, you know, I had my own epiphany kind of 4 years before that, when I realised that I was emulating all the male leadership behaviours across my level and above me. And I just decided one day, it's like, this isn't me. All of my wardrobe was grey and black and blue trouser suits, and I didn't own a dress, and nothing had any colour in it. And I didn't feel like I was authentically being me. I was too busy trying to emulate those behaviours, not because I was uber ambitious and looking to get to that next level. It was more about just being accepted and recognised as an equal in the organisation. And when I had that sort of revelation, I was very unapologetic about it, and I was quite deliberate and overt, having the discussion with my peers to say, I've had this realisation that this is what I'm doing, this is a behaviour pattern I've developed, and I'm not going to do it anymore. I am going to manage as a female leader in the way that I think is authentically me. And I just want you to be aware of that, because it's going to look and feel different to you. It's going to look and feel different to some of my team members. And actually, it was incredibly liberating. I think it's a time when that reset created it made me feel like I was flourishing. And actually, I got more promotions in that period in quick succession, I think, than I'd had of, the previous 10 years put together. So I think being yourself and being able to feel comfortable with that is so important. But I also know that not all organisations really encourage or are in a position to enable that within their team members. I suppose that's a leap of faith that I took and committed to. And part of that was because you and I went to an amazing conference, Women's International Networking Conference, and that was the first time I'd seen hundreds of professional women support each other and really work together to help develop and share information. And it was a bit of a kind of sort of moment. I'm not alone. There are other women out there with the same challenges. And it made me think, well, if they can do it, or some of their stories that they shared with us, if they can, get through much, bigger challenges and more adversity than I'm facing, then why don't I take my own step? Because actually there's a role model kind of aspect to that for all the other female leaders within my organisation, to see it's okay to be yourself, and you don't have to put a mask on to come to work every day.
The words that you're using are really jumping out at me, like leap of faith and revelation and epiphany. And to me, that is coming to your senses, is when those little moments happen, and it's like a door that you've possibly walked past for years and years and years that you've not even noticed is there, suddenly flings open, and it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that was there, didn't know that was a possibility, didn't know that there was an invitation for me to walk through. and just questioning. And I think it's one thing seeing stuff, but something I know about you, and I think you said this to me recently, that somebody else had mentioned it to you, that you're brave. And I know that's, my guess is it's something that you don't see within yourself, but I think that you are. And I think that you are somebody who, it may not be an immediate thing when you have that epiphany or that revelation. However, it's like how I think it happens for many of us, that epiphany happens. And if we try to ignore it or put it back in the box, that takes a lot of effort, and it kind of keeps coming out and poking at us. And at some point we have to go, all right, fair enough. So there's a number of different things that you've said there, like showing up as yourself, being more as a woman, showing up as a leader, leaving the private sector, going into the third sector. What would you say that helped you do those things? Because it does take courage. It does take some element of putting your big girl pants on and doing it to just experience what the outcome is. But what has it been for you? What is it that you know that you've done that's worked for you to make the changes that you've wanted to make?
I think part of the reticence of walking past that door is probably because I've often put my own needs as secondary to other needs or drivers in and around my life. I think when it comes to actually opening the door and stepping through it, I think it's either a trigger that's really made me, and I can't always articulate the trigger. I mean, the whole authentic self and female leadership, part of that was the conference. That was definitely a contributory factor, but that on its own, I don't think would necessarily have led me to take that. I think it was almost a culmination of everything kind of rising and gathering together, and that was just a little bit that kind of just pushed me over the top of the mountain.
Right.
And I don't see myself as brave. I think I've got a fairly good amount of self-belief. Everybody has some self-doubts, now and again. But I think I do believe in myself and my ability to do the right thing. And that's really key for me. Integrity is really important, doing the right thing in the right way. And especially when you're dealing with people on any front at all. So integrity is important to me. In terms of the move out of private sector, which is probably, as leap of faith go, that was definitely the biggest one, because I kind of went into a complete unknown. And that's when, you and I worked together to help me articulate and gather my thoughts to understand what is it that I want from the next phase in my life, the organisations or the type of work that I want to do. And that was really useful because there was so much in my mind and so many possibilities, and I was still trying to kind of extract myself from what I'd been. So, I knew I was going to go into a new sector. I knew I was going to take a massive cut in pay, whatever I did. And I was okay with that, because actually that's the sacrifice I was willing to make to do something that fueled my soul, that connected with my own purpose. But I didn't really know what that looked like or what that was. I had a vague idea of a couple of sectors, but the kind of checklist and the kind of role profile we created just became that, it drew me back when I was looking at roles or kind of going down a path, and I thought, hang on a minute, this is going to be the same as I've come from with a different badge on. And it stopped me in my tracks, and I pulled back from that, or I didn't apply, or I got to a certain stage in the recruitment and thought, actually, this recruitment experience is showing me that this isn't the sort of organisation that I want to work for. Let's pull out. So, yeah, I suppose I left on my own terms, which was good, but leaving was scary, and leaving with no job and no, not knowing how I was going to pay the bills that was the bravest thing I think I've done in my life, because that unknown, that's what gives me a nervous twitch on anything. Not having data, not having facts, not having a clear path.
Not having a plan.
Yeah. And I had sort of a plan, but I couldn't guarantee its delivery. There were a lot of external unknown factors that were going to come into play, and I could play my part. And that's where the self-doubt versus self-belief came in. because what I had to be during that period of about 3 or 4 months was really, really resilient, because I did get interviews and I did get down to the last two in different sectors, ones I'd never worked in, but kind of 2 or 3 times in a row, they went with the candidate that had experience in sector when I got down to last two. So that started to give me a little bit more self now. It's like I'm getting the interviews, I'm getting shortlisted, I'm getting down to the wire, but what's the bit that's not making me the candidate that they're choosing? So staying resolute, kind of getting ready to do, another application or another interview. That was it was a challenging time in one respect, but I'd also started as a non-exec director for the first time. And actually that helped me preserve my sanity, because although that was a new arena and there was a lot of learning going on, it actually helped me retain a connection with, although it's a social purpose organisation, but helped me keep a connection with something that was a little bit more familiar to me as much as it was new to me. So I had that as this little, anchor to just keep me grounded and remind me of my self-worth, what I'm capable of. And that really helped me as a constant just to navigate through until I found that full-time position.
I think having been a witness to that period of your life, I think that what staying resilient within that and being able to be determined. It reminds me of when I was, in my early 20s, far too many years ago now. And I was moving from being assistant stage manager to a deputy stage manager. And whilst it is a step up, they are completely different roles. So for somebody to have employed me as a DSM without that experience was them taking a leap of faith in me, as well as me going, I know I can do this. So being resolute and just going, I know I'm on the right path when you're being what would often be described as being knocked back. But actually, how I was, and I know I was on the sidelines with it, but it's more information gathering. It was just more information gathering, more experience, more information, more just data really, but of a different kind. And I think that by having your checklist and having that resolve of not that, I'm 100% sure it's not that. I'm not 100% sure what it is. I've got a vague idea. But I think that knowing the not that helped you not make a desperate decision when things were being offered in your direction. And I think that that's something we all need to be very aware of, whether it's in relation to work, whether it's in relation to finances or relationship or health, or very often the thinking wants to go back to the known. The analogy that I was told years ago is that trapeze artists, when they're learning the art of trapeze, once they've got the use to the swinging on their own, they've then got to learn to let go to grab the other swing or the other person. But actually, naturally, when they let go of the swing that they were on, they want to naturally grab the thing that they've just let go of. And I think that rather than the thing that's actually coming towards them, it's the thing that's going away that they're reaching for. And I think we all do that in various ways. So having a resource to be able to go, not that. I've got this vague idea of the direction, because I think when we get the no's, we've got to be okay with that, because it's just a step toward the yes, rather than being the, oh my God, but why not me? And if we're not careful, then we become desperate, and then we can make a desperate decision.
Yeah, and all those interviews, and there was some very different processes involved, different assessment tests. All of that was a really valuable learning experience, and every single one, although some of them, when I got to about the third one and started thinking, is there a pattern here? Is there something I'm missing? And it wasn't. It was just, for some of those, it's the fit for the role, it's the fit with the organisation, it's the fit with the board. It's not necessarily that you're not bringing something to the table. It's just about that level of fit with a number of other variables that you can't control. But looking back, every single interview forced me to do more research, deeper research into that particular sector. And what I then found is on subsequent interviews, that data and that understanding of the sector enabled me to talk with far more confidence in a far more informed way for questions I was subsequently asked in something else. I think the other thing, and I had a really good conversation with the chair of the board of the organisation that I'm a non-exec on, was my view about interim positions, because
Okay.
for whatever reason, I'd always thought of interim positions as, well, people do those when they can't get a proper job, and that sounds, ridiculous when I say it out loud now. But I think there was something in my mind. It's like, I can't consider that as a path, because it would be like admitting defeat, or it's meaning I'm veering away from the path, the focus that I've got. But ultimately, the circumstances led me to take up an interim position, even though I got offered the role that I'm in 2 weeks into that, and I'd committed to do 3 months. But actually, that was an amazing opportunity to segue and prove and demonstrate the skills that I had were transferable. And it was a really good opportunity to really test those in a different environment before I went into the CEO role. So in that respect, I've got a very different view of people who either make a living or spend time in interim roles, because again, it was a fantastic learning opportunity for me, and linked somewhat into when I did consultancy work. You've got to go in and you've got to make a difference quite quickly. So it's something that was familiar to me. That was a skill set and an approach that I was comfortable with. I was just doing it in a really different environment, which was an air museum. So that was charity, heritage sector. And again, lots and lots of learnings that I could then take into my next role.
So tell us a little bit about that role that you're currently in.
So I'm CEO at St Nick's, which is a charity based in York. We run a 24-acre nature reserve on what used to be a landfill site in the 70s. Beautiful place, a bit wet and muddy, as it stands right now when we're recording this, as the rest of York is as well, and much of the rest of the country. But we offer quite an eclectic range of services and activities. So as well as managing the reserve, we manage green corridors that connect habitats all across York. We run waste and recycling services across the centre of York in little electric vehicles and e-cargo trikes, getting down those little streets that were designed hundreds of years ago and not for sort of 12.5-ton recycling vehicles that are used today. And we also have a nature-based wellbeing programme. So this is all about ecotherapy and nature connectedness, and helping people with mental health challenges maintain or prevent kind of mental health, ill health, and improve mental health wellbeing. So it's not a charity that's got one single activity and one core focus. It's got 3 very distinct and very different areas of activity. So from a learning point of view, I've had to learn a lot of different things. It's not just one topic. And sustainability, climate change, it kind of overarches everything that we do. So getting involved with different groups and making a huge number of new contacts and a new network to the ones that I had previously. But now and again, leveraging that network that I'd built in private sector to try and cross over a little bit as well. So the firm that I used to work for have been volunteering more than once at St Nick's.
Brilliant.
So yeah, it's good, but it's still a learning curve for me. I'm 2 years in now, still learning every day, and I love it.
I know you do, and it's been an absolute pleasure to watch that transition. I was saying this to you a few weeks back. What I would love to know is those little epiphanies, those little nudges that you had. So like back in 2020, and those little moments of where you get this insight that something's not quite as it should be for you. Would you say that you listen to them more now? Are you aware of them more now? And if so, what do you do with them? Because I know there's a number of things that you've done differently, not just in the case of work. But would you say that you listen to them more? And if so, how do they show up for you now?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say I'm I am far more mindful of listening to, and whether it's an inner voice or whether it's something my body is telling me about how I'm feeling at that particular moment in time. So I more readily accept, that little niggle or that little voice. I'm not getting it as often. And if I do, it's not kind of the really major ones, because I think what happened previously on both of those instances we discussed, I'd gone past that door many, many times and I'd fervently ignored it. That door doesn't exist. I'm not even looking at that door. That's not a door I need to be kind of dealing with at all. I see the doors now, and I think I make a more informed and kind of more rational assessment. Oh, there's a door. Why has that door appeared? What's that door trying to tell me? Shall I open the door and have a little look through and see what's going on? So yeah, I am more mindful of it. Whether or not I'm ever going to have another massive epiphany, a big leap, I don't know. There's still plenty to go at in the sector that I'm in. But yeah, I'm definitely more, I think, attuned and less likely to ignore things, and certainly not to ignore things for as long as I did. And I think that comes from understanding a little bit more about mental health as well, because I think those little voices, those little niggles, the things that, that you say to yourself inside that can be so easy to put a lid on or ignore, or just, plough on and carry on and keep going. Actually, they're a sign that you need to kind of open something up and take another look at it, or look at it a bit more deeply. So yeah, definitely more inclined to get under the skin of it earlier and figure out what it is before it becomes this, massive step change or, physical impact or need to shift something really major.
And would you say there's a particular practice that you do to look at that door, open the door, step through, or is it just something that having gone through it as many times as you have and being part of the conversations from the ecotherapy perspective, that your awareness has been heightened?
I think because, in the role that I'm in, I'm a jack of all trades. So I'm still really, really busy. There's still stress. It's a very different kind of stress. But anybody that tells you that coming out of private sector and going into charity sector, yeah, that's a much easier. No, it really isn't. I think I'm more aware that I need to give myself the mental time, space and energy to consider the door, the voice, and give it the space and give me the space and time to really examine it. I've spent far too long just carry on, and kind of going around that hamster wheel, ignoring the voice, ignoring the door. And I think it's because I wasn't giving myself enough time out to do that. I think now I'm far more conscious that to make judgments, to examine the voices, to understand what they're telling me, I've got to stop and I've got to take some time out. And that might be going out and taking a really long walk in nature somewhere to empty my mind, or give that idea the space to germinate a little bit and to kick it round in my head. And I can't do that if it's full of all the day-to-day stuff that I'm doing every day. So it's about creating that mind space to give it chance to, for you to explore it, and for it to take up the capacity, because you've parked all the other stuff and kind of pushed it out of the way to enable that.
I love that. And when you've got a huge amount of acres to be able to walk around literally outside your office, that's a really cool thing to do. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and your insights. And I think there's so much within there about that transition, not just the transition from private sector to the charity sector, but I think even just that transition of going, I'm behaving like a man at work and I need to be me because I'm not a man. And there's so many things. And as your friend, witnessing you going from being that 100-mile-an-hour, stress-driven, striving person to somebody who is, as you say, you've still got a lot on, there's still busyness happening, but it's got a very different quality to it now. It's got a very different energy and strength behind it. It's an absolute honour to have witnessed that journey. And I'm really grateful that you've taken the time to share that with us today. So thank you very much, Ellie.
You're very welcome. You've been a pivotal part of keeping me grounded on occasions and reminding me what's important, as well as the actual work together that we did. But it's lovely to have somebody who has seen that journey, has experienced it at close quarters, and to be able to reflect that change back to me, because I think when you're going through the change, you don't always see or realise kind of what that looks like. And we've spoken about this before. So to hear someone articulate, this is kind of how you were and this is kind of how you are now, actually that in itself, you know, kind of from a coaching point of view, I think is incredibly valuable. And we do see it on some of our programs as well, that at the end, sometimes people need a reminder of how far they've come on that journey because they don't see it themselves. So thank you for everything that you've done for me, and for being my friend from when we met at our random Zumba class 10 years ago this year.
It's an absolute pleasure to watch that spring uncle is the best way that I would say. So thank you very much, Ellie.
Thank you.